Real women have curves, and that's okay. Film summary. The film we participated in watching was Real Women Have Curves. It depicted many facets of the Mexican-American demographic and some other interesting social issues that are commonly seen in this particular ethnicity. The movie Real Women Have Curves deals with many issues of race and gender through its illustration of a poor urban Hispanic family from California. This film has a sense of duty and family and the typical family roles in Hispanic society. The main character of the story is Ana, an 18-year-old girl played by America Ferrera, who has just graduated from high school. Ana lives in a very traditional Hispanic family with very conservative values. Ana is pressured by her family to work with her sister Estela in a factory. In this factory, a group of local middle-aged Hispanic women create dresses at $18 a piece that is then sold for $600. Ana has a very strange relationship with her mother, played by Lupe Entreveros. In real life, she is a graduate in sociology and psychology from the University of Texas. She also practices as a social worker helping Latin women. Ana's mother strongly believes that a woman's place is by her man and that she should not have any true identity outside of her family. Ana's mother also believes that a wife's purpose is to support her husband and be mindless, obedient in all things. Resistance and push for independence creates a strain in her family, but she continues to work in the shop with her sister while foregoing her own dreams. One of her teachers convinces her to send an application to a prestigious school against her parents' wishes. Summer, while working in the factory, Ana starts dating a former classmate of hers. This relationship is awkward for both of them because he is white and she is Hispanic. Ana initiates a physical relationship and is very confident within her own body, even standing tall and telling Jimmy, "Keep the lights on, this is me." She subsequently ends the relationship and tells him to continue on with his life in college and not to think or worry about her. The problems faced by Ana's sister mount when some of the workers abandon her. As a result, the lack in production reduces the business revenue, which places the business in extreme jeopardy. Ana's sister Stella doesn't have the money to pay her remaining workers, the rent of the building, or keep the electricity working. Eventually, Ana secretly helps her by borrowing the money from their father. In spite of all these terrible circumstances, work continues on. In one important scene, the heat in the shop has become intolerable in the ironing section. They couldn't have any fans on or else they would soil the fabrics being sewn. Ana, who has had enough, begins to take off her clothes, not caring what any of the other women have to say. Her mother scolds her for showing off her body because she feels she is overweight. The other women, one by one, realizing Ana is right, began to take off their clothes to show their cellulite, their spare tires, almost white pride, as though they were saying, "Here I am, and yet I dare you, look at myself and show what I see." In the end, she learns that she has been accepted with a full scholarship to the university she applied to, and after telling her family, her father gives his blessings over her mother's objects, and she is free to start a new life in New York City.
In the early years of the Republic, Mexicans were allowed to immigrate to America with no restrictions. Over 300,000 Mexicans became U.S. citizens through annexation of territory before 1853. Between 1850 and 1880, 55,000 Mexican workers immigrated to the United States to become field hands in regions that had until very recently belonged to Mexico. Growers in the Southwest lobbied to remove the restrictions imposed on Mexicans to ensure that they had the laborers they needed for the harvest. The Mexican migratory worker in Southwest America is regarded as a necessary part of the bustling harvest season. The need of U.S. employers to import foreign manual labor was heightened first by the expansion of cattle ranches in the Southwest and by the increase of fruit production in California in 1850 and 1880. This situation changed during the Great Depression because the lack of jobs and the rising anti-immigrant sentiment. Hundreds of thousands of Mexicans were sent back and repatriated. Before Mexican workers supported American agriculture, it was the Chinese who filled the labor hole. Nearly 200,000 Chinese were legally contracted to cultivate California fields until the Chinese Exclusion Act.
The voluntary and international migration started in the 1970s. 1 million Mexicans migrate to the USA every year. People from Mexico have attempted to migrate to the USA illegally, and 850,000 Mexicans were caught. The push and pull factors were mainly economic and social. One of the push factors was poor education in Mexico. The adult literacy rate was 55%. The pull factor for this is that the US offers good education and the adult literacy rate there is 99%. Another push factor is that Mexico offers a lot of low-paid jobs, and 40% of the people are unemployed. However, there are many jobs available for low-paid workers in the US, so they don't have to worry about being unemployed. Also, there is poor medical facilities in Mexico, but good medical facilities in the US.
Yo decidí emigrar porque pues mi familia es numerosa y aquí en la provincia donde estoy no hay dinero, no hay recursos, ni ingresos, ni nada.
The migration caused good and bad impacts on the US and Mexico. There was an increase of the cost of healthcare and education for the Mexicans. Migrant workers took unwanted jobs that paid low wages and worked very hard because they had families back in Mexico to fund. This benefited the USA economy. The culture of some states of USA, particularly the border states such as California and Texas, enriched from the culture of Mexico, music, food, and language. This created a multi-ethnic society. Lots of young men immigrated to USA hoping to find a better life and better job, leaving the elderly and children behind, and lots of women in Mexico unmarried. Some villages in Mexico were either gone or lost most of its inhabitants. One example of this is Santa Ynez. That village lost 2/3 of its inhabitants. The cause of voluntary migration is to improve the quality of the immigrants' lives economically and socially. However, the cause of forced migration is something that has happened that forced the immigrants to move, such as natural disasters, large-scale construction, and war. Migration at different scales have different effects. International migration can lead to discrimination, but national migration cannot because it is within its own country. Usually in international migration, the economy at the destination will improve, but for national migration, the economy will improve in its own country.
Mexican immigrants mainly settled in traditional states like California and Texas. Over the last 2 decades, native-born migrants began moving to non-traditional areas. These areas included states in the South, such as Georgia and North Carolina. They also migrated to Midwestern states such as Nebraska and Ohio. About 70% of the Mexican-born resided in just 4 states. Those 4 states were California, Texas, Illinois, and Arizona. The remaining 6 states with the largest numbers of Mexican immigrants included Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, Colorado, New York, and Nevada. Between the years of 2000 and 2008, 11 states saw their Mexican-born population grow by at least 50,000.
The Mexican immigration flow has decreased, and the main factor it is believed to be caused by the reduced amount of work opportunity. The sharp decline began about 5 years ago, around the time the U.S. market collapsed. Many construction jobs held by Mexican immigrants vanished. Although the Great Recession has officially ended, the job market is not back to what it was. Plus, during these same years, U.S. officials have increased enforcement of immigration laws along the borders. Deportation has risen. 6 states, including Arizona, have passed laws intended to reduce unauthorized immigration. For these and other reasons, it has become more dangerous to try to cross the border from Mexico. Over the past 5 decades, the single largest origin group of Latin American immigrants have been from Mexico. In 2011, nearly 11.7 million Mexican immigrants resided in the United States, representing close to 4% of the U.S. population. Over half of all Mexican immigrants resided in just 2 states, California and Texas. Even with the recent decline, Mexicans are still by far the largest single immigrants group in the United States.
Within our ethnic group, Mexicans, we looked at some of the divisions within this group in the United States. Thanks to the U.S. Census that was conducted in 2010, we got some very interesting statistical data. The Hispanic population has increased by 15.2 million, accounting for over half of the total increase of the population in the United States as a whole. This increase was predominantly in Central and South Americans, as you can see in the graph, as well as Mexican American. Now, the Mexican original population increased by 54% with this data, as well as the Cuban population increased by 54%. Another interesting statistic is that the Hispanics in Florida are accounted at 4.2 million, which is 8% of the total U.S. population. Mexican population is still numerically and proportionally the largest Hispanic group in the United States, but is very closely followed by, and possibly soon will be overtaken by, Central and South Americans. Racial classification issue is a big issue amongst these groups in regards to, in surveys, they usually file out as some other race. There is no classification yet for these races in most surveys and most forms. You either have to say Hispanic or Latino or other race. The different races or different divisions within the Hispanic race in the United States that are accounted for are Mexican, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Dominican, Costa Rican, Guatemalan, Honduran, Nicaraguan, Panamanian, Salvadorian, Argentinian, Bolivian, Chilean, Colombian, Ecuadorian, Paraguayan, Peruvian, Uruguayan, and Venezuelan and Spaniard, as well as other classifications that still for some reason fall under Hispanic or Latino.
Roman Catholicism continues to be the dominant religion in Mexico today at nearly 89%, though that percentage is starting to decline. Protestants make up the majority of the remaining religious groups along with some Jews, Muslims, and Buddhists. Even though Catholicism is the dominant religion, religious life is complex and is reflective of Mexico's religious and historical past. The Spanish brought Catholicism with them to the New World when they arrived as conquerors and embarked on an aggressive push to convert indigenous populations. Missionaries made attempts to understand local culture, learn native dialects, and occasionally speak out against mistreatment at the hands of the Spanish, since Catholicism shared elements of certain beliefs with indigenous religions. For example, Aztecs and Catholics both believed in fasting, pilgrimages, and the idea of a divine mother figure. Missionaries were able to capitalize on these similarities when converting the population. Missionaries even incorporated some indigenous traditions into the Catholic practice, such as allowing worship to take place at indigenous religious sites and on Aztec religious dates. Church leaders in the new colony were given broad political power and were major landowners. A prominent example of the church as part of the colonial structure was the creation of encomiendas, which later evolved into the hacienda system, under which the peninsulares were granted land and the authority to manage those living on that land, as long as they collected tributes and ensured that Indians living on their lands converted. The close connection between church and state led revolutionaries in the early 20th century to push for provisions in the 1970 Constitution, which would strip the church of a significant political influence. These included restricting religious schools and preventing the church from owning property. Overall, these restrictions have been a part of the modernization of Mexico's political and economic structures in the last century, though the church still wields considerable influence on society. One of the most significant controversies surrounding the Catholic Church in Mexico today regards abortion and family planning. Artificial birth control and abortion are prohibited by the Catholic Church. These prohibitions have serious societal and economic repercussions. In 1972, The church called for reduced family size and has promoted family planning clinics and education programs. Abortion continues to be allowed only in cases of rape, health conditions, or fetal defects, except in Mexico City where it was legalized in 2005. To that, the Catholic Church is beginning to speak out more on social and economic issues, and in fact, sided with the Separatists in their recent social and economic struggles. In societal terms, the Church continues to function in many ways as the glue that ties together the many disparate people of Mexico and provides a unifying connection in community and family life.
Every ethnicity has its stereotypes. There are a lot of negative stereotypes of the Mexican culture in America. Some of these examples are Mexicans usually have a big family with at least 6 or more kids. Mexicans are always sleep on the job. Mexicans always wear big sombreros like this. Mexicans are always illegals like this. Mexicans are always lazy. Mexicans are always drunks. Mexicans are always eating burritos. Mexicans always are part of a gang like the Latin Kings. Mexicans are of low class. Mexican women are uneducated and only good for cooking and cleaning and will work for virtually nothing. Mexicans usually do not speak good English. It's amazing that for so many of the negative stereotypes that there are so few positive stereotypes. The positive stereotypes associated with Mexicans is that they have very strong family values. They're very loyal to their families. They don't take handouts. They work very hard. They work very long hours and are very humble people.
Famous Hispanics. Ellen Ochoa. She invented optical analysis systems and was also the world's first Hispanic female astronaut. Ochoa received her Bachelor of Science degree in physics from San Diego State University and a Master's of Science as well as a doctorate degree in electrical engineering from Stanford University. Luis Miramontes was a chemist who co-invented the contraceptive pill. In 1951, Luis Miramontes, then a college student, was under the direction of Syntax Corp CEO George Rosencrantz and researcher Carl Daracy. Miramontes wrote a new procedure for the synthesis of the progestin norethindrone, the active ingredient for what would become the oral birth control pill. Pancho Villa, a bandit warlord and one of the main protagonists of the Mexican Revolution. Fernando Valenzuela was the first player to win the Rookie of the Year award and the Cy Young Award in the same season. Bill Richardson, American political figure that was the 30th governor of New Mexico. He served as an ambassador to the United Nations and was Energy Secretary under Bill Clinton.